Welcome to the bold analysis, ladies and gentlemen. The decision by Parliament or the move by Parliament to approve and anchor in law the National Dialogue Committee has a very interesting interpretation I want us to get, because on this podcast we're going to look at the thick and the thin around the move by Parliament to approve the National Dialogue Committee. And what exactly happened? Because in that gesture, it is very clear that Obasanjo, the former Nigerian president, is no longer in the picture. And I want you to see how exactly Raila played the card and William Ruto fell into his trap. This is what happened. The need for talks between William Ruto and Raila Odinga, or rather between the Azimio and the government side, was a move that was hatched by those around the two leaders, and especially William Ruto, reaching out to Raila Odinga on this critical issue. And because Raila had known very well that the first phase of bipartisan talks collapsed because of non-commitment by the government team, he was a bit cagey that he would not want to get into any sort of talks that will still suffer the same fate. And I know at one point I discussed about the mistrust that Raila did not trust William Ruto, or even physically meeting William Ruto. Of course, there is nothing like Raila would be harmed. But the second bipartisan talks, the need to go for the second bipartisan talks, was highly criticized, and even some of us believed that it was meant to fail, and it was going to fail because of what had suffered in the first one. And that is why Raila also knew very well that Kenya Kwanza were playing games, and said, I do not trust Ruto. If we are going to negotiate and talks we're going to enter into another new phase of the talks, then we need someone outside the country, a neutral arbiter, to stand in for the talks. And that is why, and that is how Obasanjo came into the picture and officiated the meeting between the two leaders. But remember, that was in the backdrop of William Ruto's demand that he did not want any foreigner, because those political hardliners against William Ruto had already believed, Rigathi Gachagua, that it was going to increase, or rather it was going to boost the profile of the talks, and to get to something akin to the 2017 National Accord. But Raila Odinga was insisting that, you know what, there is nothing like handshake, and no one is interested in handshake. And so, because Ruto team insisted on the discussion about the talks not being officiated by someone from another country, the second option was, if Obasanjo is not going to stand in, then we need a guarantee. And it was a guarantee that the talks are going to continue. The guarantee of commitment. And because Kimani Ichung'wah and the team went on top of the cars and were yapping that we will not do anything outside the law, they were given that medicine. And of course, accept that if Obasanjo is not going to mediate the talks, then let's go and put the talks in law. Let's go and anchor it in law. And because William Ruto and the team, they've always been talking about the law, William Ruto gave them the medicine. And before Raila Odinga gave them the medicine, and before they know, they had fallen into the trap of making sure that the talks continue. Someone may ask me, And I know I've been seeing this question in the comment section and to answer. Did Raila want the talks? The talks was an exit strategy, irrespective of the outcome, of whether it's going to yield some fruits or not. But there was need to end the protest because of the number of Luos that had been killed. So there was need to end the protest. On that, there was something that had to be done. Whether it had to take the shape of a talks or, whichever avenue, route that was to be taken, but the need for talks to end could not be underestimated. And that is why the talks stopped. Now, what am I saying here? What I'm saying here is, when they went to parliament, Obasanjo had to pack and leave and will not be here for 60 days. I remember in 2008, when Kofi Annan was in charge, they first agreed to end hostility, then which took very short time. Then they also talked about humanitarian aid, and the third aspect was about the power sharing. Now, immediately they finished power sharing. When the other work was to start, then done, to continue, which is now just the paperwork. Obasanjo had Kofi Annan left, late Kofi Annan left. So on this one, that was the first contention. We don't want a foreigner. Then Raila said, okay, if you don't want a foreigner, but you must give me guarantee, because Raila was not insisting on a foreigner for the sake of it, but he wanted a commitment that the route he was taking was not going to be another backlash, was not going to backfire. Then the second trap was on the funding, because William Ruto, remember when Kimani Chungwa went and said, and he said that don't expect tea. We are not going to meet in posh hotels because we are not going to pay. And that's why analysts are saying that they were not willing even to pay for Serena. That was in response to Kalonzo Musyoka's letter. That response by Kimani Chungwa was to provoke the thoughts of asking, who is funding these talks? Now, while government was then just thumping and taking a lot of credit that they were going to fund it, and of course they were not willing to fund it, and they wanted it to be done in some public baraza somewhere. But there was something that probably William Ruto did not say. And even if he saw, but he knew, but he was playing to reverse psychology and the others, that the talks was going to get the blessings of the Friends of Kenya. Because it was the handshake doctrine. The handshake doctrine is one that was celebrated across the globe. And it is normally extensively reported that there are Friends of Kenya that supported the handshake doctrine. So that is what maybe they had not seen. That is what the likes of the president's side, the likes of William Ruto and the team had not seen. But Raila Odinga knew very well that if this thing is anchored in law and with the presence of now of the former Nigerian president, it was going to get the profile and it was going to get funding. There is no reasonable doubt that they're getting funding. There are those who, of course, work and they meet and they are getting their allowances. And that is why it even had to be passed through the parliament way. It has ended the hostility, but I'm going to do some next podcast on this that is going to put on this. So they didn't know. Before they know, the funding was not coming from government. So Obasanjo technically has really helped to make the talks get the grip of the government side. And by the virtue of it being anchored on law, and because of the funding, it is very clear that his role is then inconsequential. Remember, what they have also agreed is that he's not going to step in for the talks, but he will only come in to, in case of a deadlock, when there's a deadlock between the two sides. But of course, being that if the report is processed, the report is also going to be sent to him. So that is why I was authoritatively telling you guys that Obasanjo is not in the picture. And he's not in the picture because he was an enabler of the talks. Ladies and gentlemen, then with the talks having now been domiciled within the Kenyan political ecosystem, I know many people do not trust our ecosystem for this, but I can tell you, money smoothens everything. The whole thing about we are going to do it was about the funding. So there is already a smoother, there is already some smooth around, and it has highly been oiled. Do you think what is then is the interpretation of it being domiciled within a political ecosystem? Remember now, they're going to take views and opinions from other organizations and other stakeholders, non-political stakeholders, some companies, and just the way they're going to do public participation. That's what to say. So what exactly this has then helped? These four aspects. Number one, Ruto headliners have been clearly neutralized, because this is what was there. But because now it is on law, and it means that the strong headlines that already said, no cost of living, no this, no that. If Kenyans are talking, it is very difficult to safeguard, or rather to sieve what you want the people to talk about, because other Kenyans are also there. Kenyans will also ask you, okay, fine. So you don't want us to talk about the cost of living, but we also Kenyans, we want to give our input in terms of what is going on. Then that report will be taken to Parliament. Number two, the government plan, or the Kenya Kwanza plan to brand the talks as nusu mkate plan, has backfired. This is what was said lightly, and this is what was spread, I think, for the last 1 week. This is the narrative that was told to very gullible supporters, that Raila wants nusu mkate. Now, as things stand, with that approach, it clearly tells you that it doesn't take that way. In fact, because a nusu mkate will be out of political, a gentleman agreement, the way the handshake agreement was. But even the handshake agreement that is normally compared to, that's normally used to visualize a handshake, did not have a nusu mkate. Raila Odinga was not in cabinet. Raila Odinga did not have a prime government position. He was not a prime minister. In fact, Raila Odinga was out of government. So I think Kenya Kwanza has also been disarmed of that narrative that Raila is out here for a nusu mkate. And that is why that trap has also worked for Raila Odinga. Number two, the other aspect is, with the introduction of other stakeholders in the talks, it has eroded the propaganda space, because this is one of the tools that politicians were really looking up for, that we want to play propaganda with it, so that, we get our way with everything around this. I think the 2 months, because it's taking 60 days, it's a very strategic time for Azimio to get the next frontier. Remember, if the talks were to take 30 days and then they collapse, even though I know government have always wanted to drag it, but it is a good one for Azimio to re-strategize and take their cover, retreat and re-strategize. So in any case, there will be the next political activity, or the next political discourse after that report is tabled to Parliament. I think Azimio will have been able to get time to consolidate and get the next frontier. So on this, I think Raila got it by the Obasanjo net. There was either way. If Obasanjo is not going to stand in, then let's go to Parliament and make sure this is something anchored on law and something very serious. Thank you.